responsive, awesome. Okay, so on September 19th, 1991, a dead body was found. Sticking out of the ice on a mountain in the Italian Alps, a pair of hikers stumbled upon him when they had detoured off of a path. Now, at first, they thought it was nothing. They thought maybe it was some garbage, maybe a decaying animal. It wasn't until they got closer that they realized what they were looking at was a human head and torso lying face down and sticking out of the ice. So they did what most of us would do, which was quick take a picture, and then they took off down the mountain pretty much as quickly as possible and reported the find to the local authorities. Now, the people they reported this to didn't really think much of this, because in the Italian Alps, or rather in the Alps overall, about 100 people die every year, and another couple hundred go missing while hiking. So to them, which this included the police in Austria, the police in Italy, and the landlord at the local mountain refuge, this was no big deal. It was just business as usual, and business was recovering the corpse and its belongings. So over the next couple of days, they used drills, they used axes, they even used helicopters to remove the individual and his belongings from the ice. They followed typical police forensic procedures all the way, but this changed drastically when an archaeologist got a look at the copper axe found next to the body. So copper axes are incredibly rare, and they're definitely not something that a modern hiker would be just carrying with them in 1991. This was a telltale clue that they were not dealing with someone who had recently died. They weren't dealing with someone who had even died in the last 100 years. Instead, what they were dealing with was a mummy of a man that was made 5,000 years ago. So this is the individual that became known as Otzi the Iceman. He is what's known as a natural mummy. So he's not like an Egyptian mummy where they wrap them and embalm them and remove all of the organs, but rather he was completely naturally created. After he died, very quickly he was covered with snow, and then that snow was eventually covered with a glacier. So the layer of snow formed sort of a protective barrier. It kept scavengers away, it preserved the body, but it also allowed for a little bit of air circulation to help dry everything out. So while he did lose a few body parts along the way, so he lost his hair, his eyes, a couple of fingernails, some blood, he was actually remarkably intact for someone that was mummified over 5,000 years ago. So because he was so intact, scientists have actually been able to study a lot of different things looking at his body. They've been able to study his biology, his behavior, the environment he was living in, and even what was happening in the last days before his death. So who was Ötzi and why was he up on this mountain? What led to him being buried in the snow 5,000 years ago? Well, on a spring day, he had set off into the mountains. It was relatively warm. He was a 45-year-old man, and he was carrying with him all of his belongings. He was dressed mostly in goat. So he had a goat cap, some leggings, a goat coat, some leggings. His cap was made of bear skin, and he had shoes that were actually made of deer skin and hay. He also had all of his belongings on his back. So on his back, he was carrying, among other things, a dagger, a first aid kit, a bow and arrow. He had a net with him. He had some pots made of birch bark. He had a backpack. And, of course, he had the copper axe that I mentioned before. He was alone, crossing the mountains with everything he could possibly need. Now, the question is, why? You know, this is a pretty strange behavior, and it's not strange because he was alone. It's not strange because he had so much stuff with him, because he could have been hunting. He could have been, looking for a different settlement. There are lots of possibilities. But what makes this strange is that he wasn't really in any condition to be doing this. He wasn't particularly healthy, he wasn't really strong, and he was actually pretty old for the time period. So he was 45 years old when he died, and at that point in time, the average lifespan was about 30. So he's a pretty old guy, and he's wandering around by himself. Not only that, his joints are riddled with arthritis. He has ridges on his nails, which indicate chronic illness in the weeks before he died. He had hardened arteries, and he was lactose intolerant. He also had the Lyme disease. It's actually the oldest documented case of Lyme disease in the world. And he was suffering from whipworm infection, which, among other unpleasant things, can cause diarrhea. So, not a healthy guy. He was not feeling well. So why did he do this? Why did he go off on his own? Well, the truth is, we can't really know why. Sorry, I don't have an answer for you on that today. But using archaeology, using genetics, using medical imaging, we can know all sorts of things about what his life was like. So I can tell you that he had brown hair and eyes and type O blood. I can tell you that he had genetic predispositions for certain diseases. I can tell you that he is covered in tattoos, 61 total, that are actually some of the earliest examples of tattooing in the archaeological record. And I can even tell you that he was murdered. I just can't tell you why. Now, the question of murder. Some of you are probably thinking, well, you just outlined all of these reasons why he was sick and probably not doing well, and some of them were kind of gross. Why would you assume he was murdered? Well, on Ötzi's body, he has a series of wounds that appear to have been created in the days just leading up to his death. Skeletal analysis indicates that he had some defensive wounds on his hands. He had a blow to the head, and so there was blood pooling in his brain. He also had, which was revealed upon CT scanning, he had an arrowhead embedded in his shoulder. And this had actually nicked the subclavian artery. So when you do that, it's not going to end well for you. So even though he had all of these other problems, he bled to death in the matter of minutes. So this is one of the most intriguing archaeological mysteries we have ever encountered. Now, I'm an anthropologist, and so I'm pretty comfortable with not always having answers to things. Built into anthropology, there is this lack of finality. We can't know everything, but what we can do is continue doing research and building upon what we do know to try and create a comprehensive picture. So we know a lot about Ötzi's life, we just don't know a ton about his death. Why was he in the mountain in the first place? Was he being chased? And was he shot either intentionally or perhaps unintentionally? So some of you may be wondering where Ötzi is now. Well, the real mummy is in a museum in Bolzano, Italy. He is on display. You can actually go and see him through this little viewing window. You just can't get up close to him because he's basically kept in a refrigerator, which mirrors the conditions on the glacier so he doesn't decompose. However, you guys are lucky enough to be in very close proximity to one of only 3 replicas of Otzi in the entire world. So just down the street is the DNA Learning Center, which is part of Cold Spring Harbor Lab. And when Otzi was first uncovered and when a lot of research was being done on him, staff at the Learning Center started thinking that, hey, this is a really great teaching tool for talking about human evolution, for talking about genetics, for talking about all sorts of things, and understanding how human health has developed the way that it is. So they worked with the museum in Italy, and they commissioned a life-size 3D print of Ötzi. And this is him being made. Some of you may have seen the PBS documentary about his making as well. If you haven't, I believe it's called The Iceman Reborn. It's really interesting. So they made the 3D prints, and there are 3 of them. There's one on display at the Learning Center. There is one in our storage, so we actually have 2 of the 3. And then the 3rd one is in the museum in Italy. So for those of you who are interested in learning more about Ötzi, maybe you want to see him up close, see what that replica looks like, or check out those tattoos, You can always come over to the Learning Center. Otherwise, we also do formal tours, formal guided tours of the Otzi exhibit that you can sign up for. We usually do a couple a month. And actually out on the Learning Center tables, there's a paper with a web address, so you can grab that and then go sign up if you're interested. So thank you guys for coming today. Are there any questions? Yes?
How was he murdered? Like, was it by a human or like some kind of disease?
Well, it looks like it was done by a human. So the arrowhead broke off of a longer arrow, so it looks like someone shot him with a bow and arrow.
What was the person's name?
We don't know. What do you want to call him? Yes?
How do you know he was lactose intolerant?
When they sequenced his genome, there was a predisposition for lactose intolerance in the sequence that they found. Yes?
Wait, how do you know there was an arrowhead if he only had a skeleton?
Well, he's not just a skeleton. He actually still has all of his skin. He has all of his internal organs. So when they did a CT scan, which sometimes you might go to the hospital and have one, they can actually see inside of you. And they saw the arrowhead in there. Yes?
Do they have to do any special preparation to do CT scan, or it's not going to show it damage to the bones?
In terms of the actual radiation, I don't know. They had to put him in an abnormally large scanner, though, because of the position he's in. Because this is actually the position he was found in. So his arm is out to the side and his shoulder's dislocated. But I'm not sure about that other question. Yes?
What was the area around where he was found, like 5,000 years ago? Like in terms of settlements, like was it like a place of known tribal warfare or whatnot?
So there are a few little scattered settlements in that northern Italy, southern Austria region. There's not really any documented evidence of tribal clashes or anything along those lines. There's some evidence of some pottery and some living in some rock shelters, but there's not a ton of archaeological finds in that region. Yes?
Where they find, like, where was he?
So his body was on a mountain just in the very northern part of Italy. Did you have a question?
Genetically, and with all the tools now available, do they trace him back towards Lucy, towards Neanderthal? Have they looked into 5,000 is just a little bit of time? That existed back 5,000 years ago over in Mesopotamia?
So they have actually done some analysis of his haplogroups. One of his parents, and I don't remember which one, was from a group that was found primarily in Sardinia and Corsica, in that area of the world. The other one was actually from that sort of northern Italy, southern Austria, that alpine region up there. I don't know if they've analyzed the DNA in terms of its relatedness to Neanderthal sequences, though. That's a good question. We have a question in the back. He was shot with an arrow. It's not a pleasant way to go. Yes? So in the mountains, he was actually about 10,000 feet up. So that's actually twice as high as it is in Denver. So really, really high up in the mountains. Yes? He was in life about 5'5" tall, which for, northern Italy population, that's a little shorter, but not terribly. His mummy is about 5'2", so he shrank a little bit through the mummification process. Yes?
Why did he die like this?
Well, what happened was he was shot in the back and then fell forward. So he fell on his shoulder, and then for about 5,000 years he was rolling around beneath a really heavy glacier. So the glacier broke his arm, the glacier caused his face to get all messed up. A lot of the stuff that you see going on his face and how he looks kind of crazy, that's because of the weight of the glacier on top of him for so long. Yeah? Yep, you had your hand up.
Did that Iceman have a name? Or the Iceman was his brother's name?
Well, that's what we're calling him. We don't know what his real name was. That's a good question.
How does the app tell you about his status? Because it was like advanced, right, for the age for
Yes.
that area?
So this actually, the finding of this axe pushed back the known start date of the Copper Age in Europe. So before they found this, they thought it was a little bit later. He actually was likely trained in working with copper because tests of the hair that had fallen out at the scene and examination of his lung revealed some arsenic residue. What's really interesting though is that whoever shot him didn't take the axe. So the axe would have been pretty identifying. So they knew that they had potentially done something wrong. This wasn't a robbery. So he likely was a high status individual with some specialized knowledge. Yes?
Is it possible that this wasn't exactly a murder, but more of a sacrifice of the sort?
Well, it's lacking some of the ritualistic elements that you might see in a sacrifice. It is possible there are some people who have speculated that because he was so old and sickly, he went into the mountains to die alone. But there's not a whole lot of ceremonial evidence that might go along with the idea of an intentional sacrifice. Yes, sir?
Like, can't you scan, can't you see, like, for people that might look like him or something, can't you, like, scan them to, like, see what their last name is and then see what his last name is? Like,
You know, that's a really good idea, but he is so old that he actually predates a lot of written language. So there's no real way to do it because there's no written record of him and his people. Otherwise, yeah, we could certainly give it a shot. Yes?
Any idea how far he would have transported with any glacier and perhaps he actually made it until that?
You know, that's a good question. There's not a lot of evidence that he's moved too terribly far. Especially because all of his things managed to stay in relative proximity to him. And they weren't necessarily like right next to him. They were, you know, a few feet away. But I don't know exactly how far he might have been rolled back and forth. That's a good question. Yes? I couldn't quite hear that. What was that? Did we find the other person who what?
The other parts of the body.
Oh, the other parts of the body, thank you. So he is really whole. He's actually got all of his internal organs in him. He's got his last meal inside of him. He's got just about everything. His hair fell out, but some of that was laying near his body. Some of his fingernails fell out. They were laying right there. So a lot of his organs and a lot of his body parts were right there with him. So yeah, we found a lot of it. Yes, sir?
Can you tell where he might have come from? Was he European? Was he Asian? Was he Northern European? Can you tell any of that?
Yes. So one of his parents, and I forget whether it was his mother or his father, has a haplotype that's commonly found in like Sardinia, Corsica, so that area, kind of Mediterranean. The other parent was more local to that area. So, you know, he was more or less Italian, for lack of a better descriptor.